T-minus 1 week until draft night. Could Denver's ground game be getting some reinforcements? We're taking a closer look at running backs and offensive linemen. Welcome in to Broncos Weekend, everybody. I'm Matt Boyer. Alexis Perry, Tyler Polumbus, and voice of the fan from Omaha are all just ahead. But as always, we start in studio with the Hall of Famer, Steve Atwater. Steve, we're less than a week away. How excited are you to welcome the next Broncos to Denver?
Man, I cannot wait. I know these guys are excited. I know the coaches are excited. We got a new GM who we're going to see, what he's going to do, what he's going to add to the team. This is an exciting moment for Broncos country.
Steve, this is our last show before the draft. It's a 2-for-1 special today, okay? We're doing running backs and we're doing offensive linemen. Everything must go before we start the draft show next Thursday. Denver last year ranked 13th in the league with 119 yards per game on the ground. Not bad.
Yeah, wasn't bad.
13,
especially considering all the injuries.
13 touchdowns, though, so you might want to see a little bit more production in the end zone from the ground game. However, Melvin Gordon, Royce Freeman both have 1 year remaining on their contracts. So let's look at a couple of the names running back-wise that the Broncos could add in the draft. And we start with Najee Harris from the University of Alabama. This dude, Steve, Doak Walker winner in 2020, first-team All-American, 6'1", 232. The balance and ability to make guys miss in close range for a guy his size, it's incredible. Lance Zierlein has him comped as Steven Jackson at this level. So, Steve, how do you see Mr. Harris?
He's an amazing running back. He has an amazing story, too, from where he came to where he is now, moving from California, going to Alabama, getting a whole different environment, and just playing his tail off. He's a worker. He's a guy who, when the trainers are working out with him, they got to tell him to slow down. He's like, no, I can't. I know one speed and one speed only. I got to get my mom. I got to take care of my moms. I got to take care of my siblings. So I really love the drive that's behind him. I love the story behind him, and I love the way he plays. And he's a great receiver out of the backfield, so he can do it all.
The guy at Alabama that they also had to pull out of the weight room, Nick Saban told us last year, was Jerry Jeudy. Turned out okay.
Exactly.
Steve, I don't know if any of these guys are going to be top 10 picks, but these are guys we're talking about here, late first round, early second round, right, that might be available.
Yeah, I think so. But you never know. I mean, you never know what team would take a chance and draft a running back. Unfortunately, running backs aren't valued as highly, I think, with teams as they were in the past. But he's definitely a top 10 talent. But, if he'll get drafted in the top 10, that's debatable.
Right. Our next back, Steve, comes from another powerhouse program. Clemson Tigers.
Yes.
Travis Etienne, 5'10", 215, ran a 4.40 at his pro day. Steve, when he hits top speed, you see it on the film, cuts on a dime, but doesn't lose a step. Very impressive. You want touchdowns? How about 70 career rushing touchdowns? Only 6 guys in FBS history have ever hit that mark. A lot to like about Travis Etienne. He's not as big as Najee Harris, but there are a lot of things to like.
Yeah, he's not as big as Najee Harris, but, man, can he run that football? Does he have a nose for the end zone? The only thing that I see on film that I don't like is when he's in pass protection, the guys get by him too often. He's got to be much better in pass protection, and I'm sure that's the one area that teams have question marks on him for Travis Etienne.
Last running back, Steve, Javonte Williams out of North Carolina, 5'10", 212. His ability to bounce off tacklers and keep moving is impressive. Not afraid of contact. His pounding brand of running would complement Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon likes to hit those edges.
Yes.
Maybe Javonte Williams inside. I like that balance. The Athletic's Dane Brugler projects him as more of a compact version of Leonard Fournette. I like that. What do you like about Javonte Williams?
Those same exact things. He is a guy that if he sees you in the hole, he's not going to pause. He's going to try to run you over full speed. Now he still makes moves and he sees the holes really well. But he's a tough physical running back. And when I saw him run, I was like, man, this guy, he was kind of like TD, just in terms of the physicality that Terrell Davis ran with. This guy, Javonte Williams, he does the same thing, man. He's a playmaker. He's gonna have a good career if he can stay healthy. Because again, he's a physical runner, and sometimes those guys get banged up. But I love his game.
Anytime you get compared to the Hall of Famer Terrell
TD,
Davis,
hey, man, TD was physical, boy. Hey, you come tippy-toe him, boy. He gonna run you over.
Steve, let's get to the offensive linemen now. We could see 10 to 12 really talented offensive linemen go in the first 2 days. We're going to cover 3 of the names, though, I see most often mocked to the Broncos. Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater, and Christian Darrisaw. Penei Sewell, Steve, I know you're a fan. Let's get to him. 6'5", 331, unanimous All-American in 2019, opted out in 2020. Steve, he's only 20 years old. Doesn't turn 21 until October.
He's a man boy. He's huge. He has an amazing work ethic. His teammates love him. He's a great family guy. All the things you look for in a player, his coaches, his trainers, they love him. And you see him play on the field. He's physical. He's fast. He can get out on the screen plays and knock the ball over the linebackers and defensive backs. I don't see weaknesses in his game. I think he'll be the first offensive lineman taken, and whatever team gets him is going to be lucky.
Well, let's mock that out then. 5 quarterbacks. Let's say 5 quarterbacks go before 9, and Penei Sewell's sitting there with the Broncos on the clock. Are you running the card up, or are you still trying to trade back?
Yeah, I'm trading back. Either trading back or I'm going for, me, inside linebacker.
Okay, fair enough. No doubt, though, a very talented guy. Let's move along to another talented guy, though. Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern, 6'4", 304. Again, opted out of 2020, so we haven't seen him on a football field in over a year. Really technically sound, though, Steve. Guys on Fangio's roster need to excel at fundamental football, and he does. Some people have him as a tackle. His size maybe says guard or center, but the fact that he can play right tackle or left tackle, Steve, is huge, considering the fact that the Broncos need to add some depth. Is he a guy that you like?
I do. I like his game, but again, I think he's going to be a first rounder, and I just don't know that I would do that, knowing how much capital I have invested in that position. The player that he went up against in college was Chase Young, and man, he did an amazing job of blocking Chase Young, and that's what everybody said. If he can block Chase Young, he can block anybody.
Last up, Steve, Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech. Exceptional lateral quickness and balance for a guy that tall. Played primarily left tackle for the Hokies, so he doesn't necessarily have that versatility that Slater does, but a guy, if you trade back, maybe pick up a couple of picks, could entice the Broncos at the tackle spot. But from what I'm gathering from you, maybe not a guy that would entice you as much as the other two.
I mean, he would entice me, but more if we could get him in the second, third round, yeah. But, first round, I'm not going offensive tackle in the first round. I don't think I'd go even on offensive line in the first round unless we traded back and end up with 2 picks in the first round, say a 28-29, which that's not going to happen. But that's the only way I would go offensive line, just because we're pretty set at that position right now, I think.
Let's put a bow on this, Steve. The positions that you would draft in the first round were less than a week away now. It sounds like inside linebacker you're high on, quarterback, corner. Are those the only 3 that you're taking?
And I would, if Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, if he was on the board and we traded back and he's on, I'd have to shoot my shot, man. This guy's a playmaker. I don't care. I know we got Justin Simmons. I know we got Kareem Jackson. But guess what? Jeremiah, he's going to be on the field with those guys. And so somewhere.
Yeah,
playing somewhere.
Yeah, because he's an inside linebacker.
He's not inside linebacker. He's DB.
I know you like him. I know you like him at DB. I know you like him at safety. A definite playmaker. Steve, speaking of offensive linemen, we got a good one this week on Atwater's A-Team. Another Super Bowl 50 champ, Tyler Polumbus.
Yes, can't wait to talk to my man TP.
Does Denver need to add another big guy with an early pick in this year's draft? We know how Steve feels. We're getting Tyler's take next. Quarterbacks and defensive backs have been popular mock draft choices for the Broncos lately, but is there more value to drafting a blue-chip offensive line prospect in the first round? This week on Atwater's A-Team, Super Bowl 50 champ Tyler Polumbus is joining Steve to talk about the Broncos' offensive line in 2021, as well as what he'd like to see the Broncos do with their first-round pick.
Hey, what's up, TP? Tyler Polumbus, the main man. Good to see you. Thank you again for joining me, man. We have several meetups throughout the year, and this is one I'm saying. I appreciate you.
Oh, always love being with you, Steve. Any time for a guy that's got a gold jacket, huh?
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Now, there are a lot of guys that, I've played with who were free agents out of college. You were a college free agent, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay. So now I've heard that a lot of these players played with the chip on their shoulders. Were you one of those guys?
It's a funny conversation because the recent comments that Trevor Lawrence had where he said that, he's not necessarily the type of guy that plays with a chip on his shoulder that's out there to prove everybody wrong all the time, that he's got confidence in himself. We've all got some degree of a chip on your shoulder, but it's really more what internally motivates you. I wasn't the type of guy that knew the names of every single tackle that got drafted in front of me or how many of them there were. I was very intrinsically motivated my entire career, and I was always doing it for my family, for my friends, and for God.
Who are some of the offensive linemen? I know you've probably been digging through the O-linemen in this draft. Who are some guys that you think that the Broncos could draft and they will still play with that same chip on the shoulder?
Sure. I've spent a reasonable amount of time watching the tackles in this year's draft. I haven't watched a ton of the interior guys because I don't think that that's really a particular need for the Broncos at this point. But I do think that getting a right tackle, whether that's in the first round or second, third round, is a good idea. And I hope that Juwan James is able to play a full season. But reality is that if he's not there, if he gets banged up for whatever reason, we got to get somebody in place. So, my guys that I like, obviously Penny Sewell is in a class of his own, coming out of Oregon. Reminds me so much of a teammate of mine, Trent Williams. He's just, he's one of those guys that he can carry 340, 350 pounds, and he's still going to run like a 4.9, 5.0 40. Just a freak athlete. My favorite technician in this year's draft is Rashawn Slater. That guy out of Northwestern, he is a technician at its best, and reminds me a little bit of me. I mean, he doesn't have the he doesn't. I didn't mean it like that, but I had to survive on my technique.
Right.
He doesn't necessarily have the freak athleticism that Penny Sewell has, but boy, everything he does is fundamental. It's sound. I love it. The kid out of Virginia Tech, Christian Darrisaw, he's really, really talented as well. All those guys are probably day one type of guys. So if you're not talking about a right tackle in the first round, just a couple other names that I've enjoyed watching. I like the kid out of Oklahoma State, Tevin Jenkins. He's 6'6". He's 320 pounds, big boy. So this is actually a really good year for tackles. So if the Broncos decide that they want to pick up a tackle, it's a good year.
Okay. Now, what about running back? I just want to ask a general question there, just in terms of what are a few things that you think are most important for running backs to have success in the NFL? What are a few traits that you've noticed over the years? Like, man, this guy can do this well, and he's lasted long. He was great.
Sure.
What a few items there?
Sure. Well, I've had a ton of running backs, and there's the guys that as an offensive lineman, you're like, okay, this is how I want him to run as an offensive lineman. And you pick up on a few traits that you love. The first thing that I would say, Steve, is just awareness. Are you the type of guy that can walk up to the line of scrimmage? What your landmark is supposed to be. And if my landmark is supposed to be the 5 technique on my right tackle's outside shoulder, I preemptively identify that before the snap. I've got a good idea in my brain that I'm probably going to cut this back because my tackle's not going to be able to reach him. However, you gotta be able to adapt once the play starts. And so if for whatever reason my tackle does get that guy reached, well, then I got to be able to bounce outside. So just awareness is a big deal, and then decisiveness is huge. So once you identify where is that 5 technique and where do I have to go, make a decision, put your foot in the ground, and let's go. So that's a huge part. Then the last thing I would just say, identify your playing style, know your playing style, and know who you are. Like C.J. Anderson, he's a bit of a bowling ball. If you can take on contact, do it. Take it on, run guys over, truck them. Marshawn Lynch was like that. Oh, yeah. Or if you're not a bowling ball, and if you're more like the lightning track star that's out there, hey man, get to the sideline and go.
Make a miss.
Yeah.
All right, TP. Thanks again, man. Great stuff.
Hey,
my best.
Anytime, brother. I really appreciate it.
Our thanks to Tyler Polumbus for taking some time with us this week when we come back on Broncos Weekend. Alexis Perry is taking us to Omaha this week for Voice of the Fan. Hear how a unique family connection turned Ben Roth into a diehard Broncos fan and something of a draft fanatic as well. Ben Roth was destined to be a Broncos fan. When he was young, his uncle taught him to love everything about the orange and blue. But it wasn't until Ben got a little bit older that he became somewhat of a draft fanatic as well. This week on Voice of the Fan, Alexis Perry is taking us to Omaha to hear Ben's origin story in Broncos country, as well as get the name he'd most like to hear called to Denver on draft night.
Thanks a lot, Matt. We are less than 1 week away from the 2021 NFL draft, so we are so excited to have one of Broncos country's biggest draft enthusiasts, Ben Roth, joining us from Omaha, Nebraska. Ben, we'll get to some of your expert opinions on the upcoming draft here in just a little bit, but like we always do on this show, we have to learn about how your love affair with the Denver Broncos began. So did you choose the Denver Broncos as your team, or were you really born into Broncos country?
I'd say I was more born into it. My uncle Mike actually has been living in the Denver area since, a little bit before I was born. So he's been buying me not only Broncos stuff, Rockies, Avalanche, you name it, since I can remember. And also when I was 5 and 6 years old, you guys won 2 Super Bowls. So that kind of, further just made everything go smooth. I've been a diehard basically since I can remember. So that's how it got going. And I also lived in Denver for a little bit. I moved back here to Omaha in 2018. So that was a great time getting to go to a lot of Broncos games.
Pretty sure you went to the very first game at Invesco Field at Mile High, right?
Yep. I was 10 years old. It was actually the first game ever there. So it was a preseason game versus the Saints. And so my uncle actually got my dad and I tickets on the 45-yard line. So we were row 3. And
so
yeah, it was. And Terrell Davis actually got to play in that preseason game. It was really cool to see, some of my idols play up close and personal. So.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, man. Now, look, this is an exciting time of the year for all football fans with the draft starting next Thursday. But I've heard you don't just tune into the draft on draft night. You also have a passion for the draft process. Tell us more about what sparked this passion and how you prepare for the draft.
Well, I just love NFL football. I've been driven to it since I was young, and I like to know not only the players on the Broncos, but I like to know just kind of the general NFL, how I think things are going to shake out that season, who's going to win what division. I'm as what Cecil Lammey, I know you guys have him on here quite a bit. I'm what he would call a YouTube scout because, that's all I have is YouTube as a fan. So I just kind of go down a list of the top prospects ranked, and I just watch a little YouTube video, and the guys I like, I put a little star next to it. I've been called a draft nerd by a few people, so
okay.
I do the most I can from a fan's perspective for sure.
Oh, I love it.
Yes, love that you are a draft nerd. I am slowly but surely becoming one as well. As you know, the Broncos, they have 9 total picks this year, including the 9th overall. What would you like to see the Broncos do with that pick? Do you want to see them move up, trade back, or stay put? And who for?
What I want them to do is I do want them to stay put at 9. I'd want them, number 1 would be Micah Parsons. If he's there, I'd take him. If somehow Penny Sewell's there, take him too, or Rashawn Slater. If none of those 3 are there, I say trade down to the mid-teens or early teens, not too far back. Hopefully pick up a 2nd-round pick, and then you can get a guy in the middle there like Caleb Farley or Najee Harris.
Now, of the 150 or so players that you've researched this year, who is the one sleeper pick that you like to see the Broncos select in one of the later rounds?
I'd say Jalen Darden. He's a receiver out of North Texas, and so he's ranked way down there. I think it's he's 120 or so. I'd say on the list I've been at, but if you watch him, I know that we're stacked at wide receiver, but this guy, he can return and like crazy. He could be the next great returner in the NFL. And then also Darren Hall, San Diego State. He's a safety. He's got a little L'Jarius Sneed to him, I think. So I definitely, those 2 are kind of off the radar guys. And one of my biggest off the radar guy last year was Netani Muti. And when the Broncos took him, I was just thrilled. I had him underlined and starred. And if you watched him at Fresno State, the guy just mauled people.
He's strong as an ox too.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Okay, we would love to pick your brain on the draft. Seriously, all night long. But since we are running out of time, do you have any questions for Steve?
Yeah, Steve, I was curious, with the draft coming up, what was your draft day experience like?
Oh, you know what? It was very nice. My current wife, she was my girlfriend. We were college sweethearts. And she was actually in med school down in Little Rock. And we went to college was up in Fayetteville, which is about, 3.5-hour drive or so. So, we had a get together at her place. All my family came. And for me, like, I was hoping I'd get picked sometime on the first day. You know, I know a lot of guys now, they're like, yeah, I'm going to be a definite first rounder. So I wasn't like that. I was like, hey, I hope I get picked, you know, first 2 or 3 rounds. So when the Broncos picked me, where they picked me, I was with the 20th pick. I was a happy camper.
Well, we are so glad the Denver Broncos chose you in the first round. Imagine what Denver Broncos history would be like without 2-7. Man, that would be a sad, sad thing. But Steve, thanks for being here. Of course, Ben, thank you so much for being a huge Broncos fan up there in Omaha, Nebraska. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, we appreciate you, Ben. Without you guys, man, we would be nothing. We'd just be some old guys out in the yard, out in the field playing around. Like, what are those crazy old guys out there doing? So we appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. It was fun.
Of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Matt, back to you.
Thank you, Alexis, and a special thanks to Ben as well. Hopefully he approves of that first-round pick this coming Thursday. And speaking of the draft, our live draft coverage from UC Health Training Center begins Thursday evening prior to the first round. We'll also be live following the Broncos' first selection on Thursday. Keep it tuned to denverbroncos.com and the Denver Broncos social channels for all the latest info. But we've got you covered come draft night. That'll do it for us today on Broncos Weekend. I'm Matt Boyer. So long, Broncos country. We will see you next week.